Welcome to the 5 a.m. Mester Scrum Show, where we do our nightly interviews. These are Thursday night interviews where we interview people that I would call change agents, people that are bringing change into the industry or places or people or things. And today we have Tanya Boyd is a PMP, PMI-ACP, a creative project manager. So that was an interesting way she described that. 20 years of cross-functional teams in industries like healthcare, information technology, government, disaster recovery, financial services, mortgage. And now she's chief communications officer for championship leadership. In this interview, we're going to find out not the classic, what do we do in Agile? What do we do in business? But let's get to know Tanya, what she would like to share with the people and teams around the world about a new book by best-selling author Christopher Connors. And we're going to go into that a little bit. And as we go, Tanya, can you share some of your background journey up until now, like the present position, sharing your project manager stories, side jobs, however that. Tell us something that's not in your LinkedIn profile.
Absolutely. So before I started this journey with the book, The Champion Leader, I lived in Baton Rouge for a little over 20 years. I wound up moving to Lafayette, Louisiana in 2019, which helped me get new jobs over here as well, because it's about an hour and a half as way. But my reason for doing that was to be closer to my father, who is now 76. So that's a big part of my identity, is being the only child of my father and just kind of being here for the legacy that my parents created. So beyond that, I like to have interesting hobbies such as karaoke, do a lot of wellness initiatives, and I'm an avid nature adventurer and photographer.
Okay, cool. That was nice hearing all those different things. Now, could you share what you enjoyed about using? I read you wrote using metaphors and themes to help educate others on concepts of project manager, and believe that a healthy dose of humor should be required in meetings. And I know we'll talk about you help with the PMI chapter, but can you share a little bit about what do you mean by the metaphors and the humor in the meetings that you ran?
Absolutely. So I think that storytelling is something that we can all relate to, whether it be in the movies that we've seen growing up or in adulthood, or in the books that we've read. And even in Agile, they've got the term themes. So it's taking something that's familiar and breaking down the language, because every industry, project management, disaster recovery, financial services, all of them have got their own frameworks and different language. So the more that we can take recognizable metaphors or themes and relate our subject to that, to where people can identify with it, it really just helps to make the message resonate a bit further.
So when you talk about those metaphors and themes, how maybe we can talk about a little bit like your story about volunteering and being what I would call a servant leader to your
Right,
local PMI chapter, right? And maybe how you
right.
might have used some of that in that world of that hosting. But also,
Okay.
I thought an interesting story you shared with me about what people thought about your job as leader, and interesting, especially that you had a little story about job hunting. You
Right.
had one person in there was asking you about helping you with the job hunting. If you're gonna talk about how hosting the meetings, having a little humor, sharing a little bit of metaphors helped out, as well as what they were looking for you as a servant leader in the position at PMI.
Right. So being a part of PMI, I've had my PMP since 2014. I've had my ACP since 2020, and I've been directly connected with the PMI Baton Rouge board in a leadership capacity since 2017. And so while I was in that role, I wore a lot of different hats. The first hat that I wore was in professional development. Also dabbled a bit in the communications, was in the role of finance for a while. And then in 2022 to 2023, moved into president. Because I managed the volunteer chapter during some of the COVID years, that required a lot of agility, transition, and change, just even acclimating the group to getting used to a virtual format rather than in person, getting people to connect again, getting them to even turn on their cameras, and connect in that fashion. Um, so I had a long runway of being involved with the chapter at that level, and it gained a lot of different visibility. And because of that, when people would go through different transitions in their lives, whether they were in layoff or looking to change roles, or they were really wanting to upskill and give themselves more opportunities, they would wind up coming to me and many of the other board members to ask for advice on how they should do that, how they should prep for the PMP, and even different things like, did we know of any job openings, or simple things like perhaps their application at PMI was rejected to sit for the PMP. And we had to coach them and tell them, look, let's just take complicated engineering terms like decommissioning. Take some of these tasks and frame it in PMI's terminology to make that make sense to the people on the other end. Because project management it spans all industries. So
So you had a big demand of you to help people find jobs, right? And maybe
yes,
as one of
yes,
your jobs on there, and maybe like, well, your job is to
right.
find me a job. Is that necessarily the
Yes, that
job of
no.
a PMI leader?
No, it's not, and that, so most people were very grateful and very appreciative for any help that we would give them. But, there are times that personalities are different. And sometimes I think that entitlement has at times worked its way into society. So I have definitely experienced, you were a leader and you do this. And so, yes, I expect you to find me a job, and a well-paying job at that. And, I just had to step back and realize, okay, how do I reiterate to this person that I'm a volunteer leader, also working a full-time job and balancing my own life, but still be kind and give them the tools, techniques, and advice? It's kind of like teaching somebody to fish. You can teach them how to fish, but you're not going to go bait the hook for them every single time. You can do that a few times and help to empower and inspire them. But
You know,
yes,
I appreciate that because that's a difficult terminology. In Agile, there's a big thing about being servant leaders. And a lot of people don't understand what servant leader is. They think I'm here to serve you, or I'm your admin, or I get all your stuff and do all that stuff. But
right.
that's not what a suitor. I love the way you
Not
said I can maybe bait the hook a couple times, but I want to teach you how to do it yourself so that
right.
I'm serving you better by you knowing how to do it and what to do
Yes.
than it is me doing it for you. And I think that's the clear difference, my twist on the servant leadership role that people
Right.
miss out sometimes. Like, I do everything for you. No, no, no. I'm here to help you understand how to do what you need to do, improve it, grow you, support you and your endeavors. And I appreciate the way you worded it. I had to step back, figure a kind way to reply back. I'm not here to get you a job. I'll help you better
Right.
customize your ability to get the job and look
Right.
better on those job applications, but it's not my job to get you a job.
Right. And it is. It's tricky water to kind of tread. But I mean, part of project management and servant leadership and really just coaching and everything is
Mm-hmm.
really understanding that everybody's got a different personality, everybody's got a different makeup, different experiences. And then you throw in, the different generations training and where we've all grown up and how we've grown up, and I mean, I was from a generation where I really didn't have access to the computer
Right.
until I was later in high school and college. So it was very different for me. I mean, I existed at a time before there was Facebook, all the social media, so I do have to empathize with people that is the only world they know. And, the world changes. So it's just try and be kind and adapt to it and move the messages home so that in a way that people can understand it. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. That's excellent. Now speaking of that, so we talked about you were the head of the PMI, and I guess you got speakers, right? I found it interesting. We were talking about how finding speakers for a group you led, one of your roles helped you meet Christopher Connors, right?
yes.
And now he kind of reached out to you to help promote his book and everything. Can you share a little bit about
Yeah.
the process of getting speakers, people volunteer, and then how you met Christopher and
Right.
end up in this role? That would be great to share with the audience.
So with the speakers, when I was first connected with PMI, in 2017, our process looked completely different because it was in person. It was something that we went to local leaders, which at the time I was living in Baton Rouge. So we really were reaching out to the Baton Rouge leaders, and getting them to come and speak in person. So it was not always the same pool, but it was kind of a similar pool. And so then when the pandemic happened, we had gotten, I had had three speakers that were lined up for the beginning of 2020. And at the time we were doing both Lafayette and Baton Rouge. Lafayette was trying to get its own
Mhm.
satellite going as well. So we were doing meetings in both places. And I was attending both because even when I was in Baton Rouge, I knew for about a year that my goal was to move here to be closer to my father and to help him. And so I had three speakers that were lined up. And then the pandemic happened. So we were probably down as a chapter. I mean, we didn't totally close, but it took us about 3 months worth of meetings to kind of figure out, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to sustain this? Some of the volunteers had to drop off of the board because job loss, priorities, other things that were happening. And so there was a very core group of us that said, okay, are we using WebEx? Are we using Teams? Are we using Zoom? And so we decided on Zoom as our platform. And then it was like, okay, well, what comes next is I reach back out to these people that agreed to speak in person. And I asked them, hey, would you be willing to do this virtually? And I'll help coach you because I'm going to have to moderate this. And this is like brand new territory for me too. And I have no idea what I'm doing because I had never done it before. So you literally really just have to sit in that super uncomfortable zone and ask, tell other people, hey, me too, I'm here with you. And sort of coach them through that process. And luckily, every single one that had been willing before in person were willing to adapt. So that helped us to get started. But the LinkedIn journey at that time was really starting to expand because when they had no other outlets and they were forced to sit in their home, I think we started appreciating the power of social networking. And I know for me, like I had the opportunity to go to the first PMI Global Conference in October of 2019. So I connected with a lot of people there and was friends with them from different countries. So I was literally reaching out and just having conversations with them, going, what's going on with you? What's happening in your country? How is this affecting y'all? And so it opened up the door for conversations. So most of 2020, when we got virtual speakers, a lot of it was still kind of localized. And then I remember in 2021, we started having people ask us if they could speak for us because we were doing a really good job of marketing on social media and we were really upbeat and positive. And so we started featuring more speakers that were in other areas. And where Chris comes into the picture, I had actually connected with Chris on LinkedIn in 2019. So it was before the pandemic. I knew of his work because I was following a group of authors that used to always write for the platform Medium. And I really liked what many of them were saying, and I enjoyed reading that. So I was following along. And I think our original Zoom meeting, I think I had just commented on one of his posts. And we were talking about emotional intelligence because he has been practicing that and wearing that hat for over 12 years. And so we had a Zoom. We got along great. We just remained connected. We both realized that we had the PMP. I remember he had my phone number. He called me one day even about how to submit for his PDUs to like keep his certification renewed. So those conversations just continued. As a chapter in 2021, we were hoping to have a professional development day, and it was originally envisioned that I was going to reach out to Chris, but that year the COVID numbers spiked a little bit more, so we didn't wind up having one. And it just came about that when we really had an opportunity to plan our big professional development day in August of 2023, I had Chris. There was 3 other speakers. One of them, Oliver Yarborough, is also known in the PMI community, local lady Keisha Buto, and a very interesting local man named Walt Handelsman. So we were able to bring them in person. And that was my first time actually meeting Chris. And so, like I said, we've watched each other's social and LinkedIn behavior for years. And when he wrote his 3rd book with Wiley, when he got near the end of that project, I had experienced a layoff from a tech company in November. So he reached out in January and he's like, "Hey, are you working? Would you be willing to do this?" And so we talked about that, came up with a role, to help, and kind of been off to the races ever since. So, but it's a testament to LinkedIn. Like, even connecting with your network, you literally never know where that will lead.
Yeah, you don't. It's funny how you said you intersected with with him as a connection throughout your career or whatever. I had the same experience. A couple people that you never know, people you worked with in the past, how you would meet again and split apart and meet again. I had one gentleman who was a military officer who I met through one avenue. And then the next thing I know, we're working for the same company.
Yep.
Which I had nothing to do with him there or me there, whatever. But it was just interesting how we intersected, and people at that point didn't know, well, how do you know him? How do you have this relationship? And it's just going in and out of their career. So I always think it's important with these connections that you build, whether it be in a PMI or local groups, scrum.org or Scrum Alliance or Agile Alliance or any of these groups, local chapters of stuff. You never know when you cross paths again, or you might need each other and they may help you out. So I always find that interesting.
That is 100% true. And it's wild. Chris knows this. I'm a super huge Kevin Bacon fan, and the 7 degrees or 6, is it 7 degrees?
Something
But
like
I
that.
told him, I said, what's interesting, I said, not only his movies, just watching his life on the farm now with the goats where he sings with the guitar. I'm like, that's adorable. I said, but it is life that you wind up intersecting again.
Yeah.
So
Well, that and career path. Like I even said on my show earlier was about ego. You have to get rid of your ego. Like, I know everyone, I know everything. Break off that ego and go out and meet people, because you never know when they can help you or you help them. And if you're like, well, he wrote a book, but he connected with you. So he got rid of that ego to have that connection to say, how can you two of you help each other out? So, it's really important on that. And I more kudos to him to not having that ego, not to talk to people and build that connections. And now you're working together, helping them out and to be successful, which is awesome. So let's dive in the book a little bit. Champion leader, harnessing the power of emotional intelligence to build high performing teams, which we all know like we all want to build those high performing teams, right?
Right.
So how can this book be handy for coaches, scrum masters, project managers, anybody looking to up their game and their career? When you look at this book, how can that book help?
I think it helps in a lot of different ways. And I think it's actually very applicable, not only for professional, but also for personal. And so even on this journey, like a lot of my role robot involves me doing direct outreach. And, I have been amazed, but not amazed about how many people are open to work right now. But that's a huge thing in our economy. I mean, since I moved to Lafayette, I've experienced 3 layoffs. So I have walked in those shoes and I understand it. So even for people that are looking and not right now working with the team, I think it's important. Um, so I know perhaps that Daniel Goleman did not create emotional intelligence, but to me, that's
Mhm.
one of the most widely known books is the principles that he sets forth. Where Chris's book really excels is he takes those principles and he breaks them down further. The book is structured in a way, it's got 12 chapters in it. It's structured in a way that each one of them starts with a story. He uses individuals, both ones that are well known, like Herb Kelleher of Southwest Airlines. Steve Jobs makes an appearance, but he also uses current leaders that he has talked to and interviewed since the pandemic that have kept their companies afloat since then. And he incorporates some of the stories from those leaders. He also provides different resources like reflection questions are in all of the chapters, checklists of different things that they should be looking for that relates to different subjects like
Mhm.
practicing assertiveness, practicing candor, putting your ego aside is in there. The power of reinventing yourself, which I've had to do that multiple times throughout my career. The layoffs, just being able to transition in between different industries has been a powerful toolkit. And he also provides different exercises for team buildings that teams can practice. So he really, really, really drills down into the topic and he describes it in a way that is very relatable to people without a lot of the jargon, which I think is super, super
Right.
important. He does dip into a lot of the neuroscience as well, but this is definitely, while it uses psychology, it is more of a practical, actionable guide.
Um, so that's great. So there is a chapter in there that I'm really interested in, and
Okay.
that is chapter 10. And in chapter
Okay.
10, it's about looking for ways to build um high performing teams for everyone looking for that edge, and there's
Right.
something in chapter 10 which is the title, the voice of the champion leader, right,
Okay.
that may help with that activity.
Absolutely. So this chapter actually is structured different than all the other chapters. Um, whereas I mentioned the reflection questions, checklist, all of that, this actually incorporates the literal voices of people who he has interviewed in his coaching business that have been still leading their teams since the pandemic. So share the cover of the
There you
book.
go.
In chapter 10, let's see. So some of it, and I'll just give the titles of the people that he includes. One of them is a chief research officer of New York University. He shares her voice. One is an assurance managing director of Ernst & Young. Another is the president and CEO of Harlem Educational Activities Fund. A senior vice president and market leader at a global financial services fund. A director of operations. And then the other areas that he goes into, he's a huge fan of sports and John Wooden. So he talks about wisdom from the Wizard of Westwood.
Okay.
And then just starts talking about, this is actually will appeal to you. The ego is a tightrope act.
There you go.
So even when you were
Timing.
talking through that, I was like, oh, it's true. So let's see. I'm just going to read. Ego can lead to overconfidence. Being overly confident often leads to mistakes. And I think that's true. I mean, I think when we see ourselves as being bigger than our britches, it can lead us to act in a way that often alienates other people. So I think that being humble and being kind and remembering that everybody is a human being, no matter what role, if somebody thinks, oh, this is just this role, they don't do anything, that's not true. And the same thing goes for the CEOs at the top. I mean, there's the phrase that says that it's the lonely at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of friends that are in those type of roles, and they have shared that with me, that a lot of people think that they have to talk to them so differently that they can't ever relax around them, and that it's not as fun to have conversations. So it's just, there's a lot of encouragement to treat people equal, be respectful, be humble, and be kind.
Okay. I appreciate that. That's kind of curious. And I like the fact that so it sounds like they're getting voices of experts in the that are champions in their own right
Yes.
and how they
Yes.
handle that. So that's good. So, what is your favorite part of the book, and how do you think it would help people in their careers?
Yeah, I'm gonna be really transparent and say I haven't settled on a favorite just yet. I had read the early drafts, just on the computer.
Hmm.
I got one of the early copies that came in from Wiley, and so I've been going through the book a lot to create different content. I liked his chapter on prioritization, but there's so many different lessons in it that makes it a very different type of book than most of them that I have read that I really love. I mean, I love the titles about it that just grab you in, and then just a lot of the different questions. That's a hard one. Like, I read the question earlier and I was like, I don't know. Let me just be honest and say I don't have a favorite yet, because I'm almost in the process of rereading some of the messages and really thinking about how it applies to me. And yet at the same time, using some of it for my role and helping to represent him in content creation, and just picking out different things that I think would highlight things that can help other people.
Um, I don't know if this was so. On that note, I like what you said about it. The overall book has these chapters. Would you be able to read what chapters are in the book and share some of those chapters?
Absolutely.
And so that
So,
people can see how this may end up being a reference. Like I like going back and rereading books every once in a while because I see it based on where I am in my that
yes,
point in time. Different things will come to a light that I didn't pick up when I first read it.
I totally agree with that. So there's 12 chapters. I'll just read the titles of them. The first one is Leadership Connection Perfection, which is about leading with emotional intelligence and bringing people together to achieve incredible results. Second one is You. Championship leadership starts with mastering self-awareness. Why? Discovering the purpose and motivating factors that drive high-performing teams. Your organization, how to use empathy and social skills to make everyone around you better. Prioritization, mastering the art of time management and strategy. Camaraderie, I do love camaraderie.
Right.
Fortune favors the bold leader. Learn to lead with confidence and courage. Connecting the cord, which cord stands for communicate, identify opportunities, build relationships, and make smart decisions. Number 9 is adaptability and responsibility, lead through change and take ownership, which is huge. 10 was the voice of the champion leader. The little things make a big difference. 11 is leadership, heart, and soul. Learn to lead with compassion and spirit. And number 12 is the drive for more. Guide your team to always move forward, which I do think that that last one is very important. It's one of those weird, I'm going to call it a weird thing in life. Because even when we hit the biggest milestone or climb the biggest mountain, you always have to descend the mountain and go back down to a regular altitude. And then you have to acclimate and figure what is happening next. I mean, and I see it even in retirement, because sometimes we think of accomplishments as we get here and that's it. That's not it. You know, it's not it. And then you come down and then you figure out your next plans and rebaseline. I mean, I see this every day with my dad. Every day is different on what he is planning to do, and he's 76 years old. So while his accomplishments are different than mine, which may look like he still climbs up trees, which drives me nuts with the chainsaw. I have pictures to prove it. I've put it on LinkedIn. But, that's his goal. I'm going to cut down this tree and I'm going to get rid of all of these branches. And if I can do X, Y, and Z, I'm accomplished. So all throughout life, we always have to figure out what's next, what's going to drive us forward the next day. And it doesn't matter how big or small it is to somebody else, is my opinion.
No, that's good. And I appreciate all the different chapters looking at it. All those are handy for anybody who wants to be a leader, to elevate their career to the next level. I think it'd be all those subject areas, just learning from other people, getting rid of that ego and being willing to learn from others. Okay. So lastly, how can people get a copy of the book? Or maybe do a speaking event or whatever that Chris is doing to help market this book.
So there's a ton of resources available.
And share a picture of the book.
Yes, share a picture of the book. All right. So The Champion Leader is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Thrift Books, Goodreads, Walmart, Target, everywhere where you prefer to buy a book. The official release date is May 7th. I was a little surprised, and I've seen one other friend that got their copy earlier, but we both bought them on Amazon months ago. So some of those have been delivered. Right now, it's the paperback that's available. I think there's a certain price range, like Amazon. I've seen it at 20, and I saw it down to 19. So right now, it's the paperback. There will be an audio version. I don't have the definites on the timeline yet, but I have heard possibly June. So those things will be coming, but right now it's available through those retailers. Chris he's been doing keynote speaking for 12 years. He does executive coaching. He does speaking engagement. He is on LinkedIn at Christopher D. Connors, and that's Connors with 2 O's. He also has a YouTube channel, as well as a Facebook and an Instagram where he promotes. His LinkedIn is probably one of the most active sources out of Charleston, South Carolina, and currently has got a network of about 55,000 individuals following him. He does publish a newsletter every Thursday that goes out. And he's also a LinkedIn learning instructor. He's got a course on LinkedIn that's called Leading with Emotional Intelligence. I think depending upon people's subscription to LinkedIn, some of them, if they've got the premium, I believe, can get that for free. Others may have to pay for that. And just anything with promoting people in general. With LinkedIn, when you take their course, it'll allow you to post that at the end. And then, of course, with people that have bought the book, we're asking them to leave a review, because that always helps authors tremendously. It's kind of like the first phase of the project is planning, getting things done. Then you sit down and you actually write the whole thing. But as soon as you're done with that, there's a whole other project. It's called marketing. And how do you how do you elevate your brand and make yourself stand out in an extraordinarily competitive and saturated market? And the best way to do that is just to encourage people to share. If they get good advice,
Yeah.
share it, whether it's Chris, whether it's, I know that you're working on something, a book as well, too. So even people supporting you in the future and helping to share your message. That's the way that networking and
Yeah.
karma works and
And
helps.
when did you say the book's getting released officially again? What day?
So May 7th, that's
May
actually
7th.
going to be next Tuesday. So
Okay.
we're about a week away from that.
So
And
they'll all see the broadcast of this about a couple of days
well,
before
oh
that.
yeah,
They can go on
yeah,
Amazon and
yeah.
and share a cover of the book, copy the book up there again. Can you share the book again?
Oh, sure.
Sure. Make sure everyone sees that's what it looks like. The
The
champion
champion leader.
leader.
And I'm from Louisiana, so I'm like, ooh, I love these colors. It's the
Yeah,
Saints colors. I
there
have
you go.
to have to call that out. So
Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing.
thank
And I wish you all the best, you and both Chris,
thank you.
and getting the book out there and do what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate it.
Okay.